I'm Sonia Usatch-Kuhn, your host. Welcome to Poets on Poetry. I will be speaking with members of the North Carolina Poetry Society, discussing the myriad components that are involved in the process of writing a poem. My guest today is MORROW DOWDLE, who lives in Hillsborough and has a bachelor's degree in art history and a master's in physician assistant studies. MORROW recently retired his physician assistant position and became a stay-at-home parent. MORROW edits poetry for Sunspot Literary Journal and runs Weave and Spin, a performance series which features historically underrepresented voices, and teaches creative writing to inmates at the Orange Correctional Center. I'm sorry, a tongue got in my way, in Hillsborough, as well as through the Prison Writers Organization. MORROW spends as much time as possible outdoors, studies herbalism and spirituality, and is always seeking ways to live in a way that is simple, peaceful, and just. Welcome, MORROW.
Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure to have you here tonight. You wear many hats. Since trading your medical cap for a parenting one, have you discovered anything poetically about being with your children and in this new 24/7 role that you now occupy?
Yes. What I would say to that is it's much more work than I expected, which I think most people who make that transition experience.
Yes.
And gives me so much more of an appreciation for, my friends and family who have been doing it all along and people in society at large. But I really love my kids, and I sometimes say that they're my happy place. They're the people that allow me to have the most fun, way more fun than I think I would be having on my own, even traveling around the world or something like that. So their joy, their freedom of spirit, I think really brings a lot of life and vitality to my work.
How many do you have?
I just have one daughter who's 9 and my son who's 4.
Okay, one of each.
Yes.
Okay. So, how long have you been doing this now?
6 months.
6 months, that's enough time for me to ask you, have you written any poems about them?
I have written a few poems about them. I wouldn't say that they're a frequent, subject that comes up, but when they do, it's powerful. So.
Do you have one with you?
I do, actually.
Okay, I'd like to hear one.
Sure, absolutely. This one is called, give me one moment.
Sure.
My daughter refuses to eat the crumbs.
Oh, I thought the broccoli.
There you go. Right. Well, that too. That's my son, though.
Okay.
My daughter refuses to eat the crumbs from her bag of Parmesan crisps. I tell her about children in harem under stones, waiting to be rescued. They're hungry, I say, as if shaking fragments into her mouth will somehow fill their bellies. My parents did it too, eyed my unscraped plate, relayed the state of empty stomachs around the world. Back then, it was China and Ethiopia. Today, Yemen and Ukraine, the tent city on the side of I-40. Their guilt never stopped me from throwing my bologna on wheat and dried apricots into the cafeteria trash. Now I'm embarrassing my daughter as I circle with the fancy processed bits I splurge on at her request. I keep her better than fed, then wonder when she cannot understand starvation. Every mother dreams their child a feast. On a Syrian street, she spreads a table with makmor and matabal, honey and fruit for when the child comes home to eat.
Wow, that's quite a piece. Really like that.
Thank you.
You've incorporated the world right into your kitchen.
Right, there you go.
Wonderful. Well, let's leave the kids playing.
There you go.
And let's talk a little bit about how you became involved with Prison Writers Organization and the work that you do with the prison inmates.
So I have some very good friends in Hillsborough who have worked in the prison system for years, and they asked me kind of on a lark early last year whether I would be interested in teaching a poetry workshop there, since they knew that's what I did. And there wasn't anybody who was offering that kind of service. So I did my first workshop in January of 2023, and it was a truly amazing experience. I had already had a little bit of experience doing some workshops in the context of, using my psychiatric practice background to do some work in teaching poetry to help with trauma. So I brought that to the prison, and it was incredibly eye-opening. And it was such a gracious experience. People were just so happy to have an opportunity to be creative and to do it in community with others, not just others from the outside, but also with each other. There was some real relationship building that night that I think surprised all of us. Just because when you write with other people like that, especially poetry, I think intimate things just sort of naturally arise.
Were they willing immediately to meet with you?
There were a few people who were certainly skeptical, and understandably, but most people were delighted to just have an opportunity to do something different. And I mean, that's what studies repeatedly show, that, we do such a great service to provide programming to inmates. It enhances their quality of life in ways that, actually prevent recidivism, increase their employment and educational opportunities when they leave. So it's really beautiful to just get to be a really small piece of that.
Oh, that's wonderful. So let me see. I do need these sometimes. How do you teach them about the infrastructure of a poem? For instance, craft, voice, imagery. How do you start with people who probably don't have a background in poetry?
To me, I find it most effective to break things down into very small parts and to focus on one thing at a time. There are some folks that I've worked with who are actually accomplished writers, had lives, lives in which they had been highly educated before they came into the prison system. But most people are just writing from the heart, more of a diary entry type situation. So I try to just focus on one thing at a time and use writing prompts and examples of poems to focus on, a particular element of craft, kind of like how Ellen Bass does in her workshops, which I find really inspiring. I think just allowing people the opportunity to focus on, say, image or metaphor, that's a huge one. I work with people,
Yeah, that's a good one.
it's a good one.
It's an understandable one.
It's an understandable one. And it's one that can really elevate something that's sort of prosy to poetry more quickly.
How long have you been doing this?
So I started January of 2023, and then mid 2003 until really just recently, there were a lot of things going on at the prison, and a lot of the programming was shut down.
Oh,
And it's hard to get into the politics of all of that, but it was heartbreaking selfishly for me because I really enjoy that work. But I'm at a point now where I'm trying to figure out how I can resume those classes, because it's meaningful and I think it is a real public service.
and it's a volunteer situation.
It is. And in the meantime, I've been doing the Prison Writers Organization through the North Carolina Writers Network, where I correspond with an inmate at a facility that's out of state. But we do kind of a one-on-one teacher, writer.
Is it a Zoom? Is it Zoom?
No, it's just letter writing, old fashioned.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
It is
news.
wonderful, actually. I love that.
The art of paper and pen. Oh.
Yeah, I'm a big paper and pen person, so it's wonderful to me. The only downside is it does stretch out the time between letters.
Oh, I'm familiar with the North Carolina Writers group. So
Mhm.
how did you hook up with them to come to unravel yourself and re-ravel yourself into the writing with the prisoners?
Right. So I have several friends who are part of that organization, but also had friends who were teaching workshops and just made me more aware of their yearly conferences. And so I went this year and it was wonderful. I had a really good time in the workshop I attended with Tyree Day. And then just in the course of emails, they said that they were restarting the program. Apparently it had shut down during COVID, but they were reinstating it. So I was very excited because it's obviously tangential to that other work that I'd been doing.
So you're doing that and you're hoping to get back into the prison
Yes.
system to be able to start your workshops again.
Yes.
Well, that's commendable. Did you bring any poems that they wrote?
I did not.
Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Just tell me briefly, what do they write about?
Most of them write actually incredibly positive poetry. A lot of it is about spirituality. A lot of it is about repentance and hope for forgiveness and longing for a better future. Really, that's the predominant subject, which is, it's wonderful. Some people do write more political kind of things, you know, their worry, their concern for, you know, the state of our society. Some people, but almost never does anybody write about particular experience. If they write about their own pain, it's usually in a more oblique way.
What about anger?
The anger usually comes through the political poetry. Anger toward a system that's unjust, that you know, colludes to incarcerate certain people more than others, and for, you know, for crimes that maybe, you know, giving punishments that maybe are outsized for the crime committed. So that's where a lot of the anger comes in.
That, but what if they're guilty? What if they were there because they were found guilty? So do
Right.
they accept the guilt?
They do, yeah.
That's what I'm
Oh
trying
yeah,
to
there's a lot of humility. Like I said, I mean, that's really the most common poem is, you know, feelings, expressing remorse, hoping for forgiveness, and looking towards a better future. So they're humble, and it's humbling to be part of that.
Yeah, must be.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's move on a little bit. I am not familiar with the Sunspot Literary Journal. Tell me a little bit about the kind of work that they are seeking for publication. And if you have a website, you might mention that in case any of our listeners want to submit.
Yes, absolutely. I don't recall the exact website because I'm usually interfacing through Submittable, but if you just Google Sunspot Literary Journal, it's based in Hillsborough, North Carolina. So you could put that into if you're not finding what, you know, the journal itself. But it's been around since the mid to, you know, 2010s. The editor is Lane Cunningham, who is a delightful person, and I think a wonderful editor. She's also a writer herself. And she, you know, we look for work that the vision is pretty expansive. There's definitely an interest in underrepresented voices and experiences. So we love to have work from international writers. And really, one thing that's really cool that listeners might be interested in is she accepts long form poetry, which is fairly unusual in journals these days. So we'll sometimes get submissions of a 12-page poem. She'll publish it if she likes it. If it seems to fit the upcoming issue, I should say. So it's
theme.
Usually there are not themes to the journal, but she runs themed contests all throughout the year. So it's really worth looking at that as well. She also offers a couple different types of submission. One of them is a fast turnaround one. And I know these days some people really love that because it's difficult sometimes to wait, 6 to 8 months to hear back from a journal.
That's true.
Yes.
Waiting is hard.
It is hard.
That's a poem.
Yes.
So can the prisoners submit?
That's a great question. They could if they could find a way. It's funny you're asking this because I was having this discussion with somebody the other day. There are specific journals that specifically solicit poems from prisoners. Rattle is one of them, and they provide directions on how prisoners can submit. But because submissions have gone almost entirely electronic and inmates typically don't have access to the internet, it's much more difficult to make that happen. And ethics in how we're allowed to interface with inmates explicitly prohibit us from submitting work on their behalf.
I was just going to ask
Yeah.
you that.
So
That's too bad.
I think the thought is, what I have been told is that if they get rejected, it's an psychological hardship for them, and they don't deserve more of that. Right. Right. It is. It really is. So I don't know.
Sorry.
But yeah. But the cool thing is, in Hillsborough, there are a couple opportunities in the community for prisoners to share work. There's a wonderful art exhibit at Margaret Lane Gallery in downtown Hillsborough every year called Something to Say, which exhibits poetry and artwork by the Orange Correctional Center folks. And there's actually a poetry reading that happens in conjunction with that event. So,
but the prisoners can't come and read.
Actually, they can, and they did.
Tell us.
Yeah, it was a beautiful event. There were folks there who had been formerly in OCC. There were people who were currently in OCC.
You're saying
the Orange Correctional Center. Yes. Yes.
Make that clear.
Yes, of course. Sorry.
Okay.
And it was a wonderful event. People had an opportunity to share original work, and it was a good crowd. There were probably 40 or so people in the audience.
That's a good crowd for
It was.
poetry.
Yeah, it was. So I'm happy that exists because, again, people do love to share their work. I mean, most of us as poets do.
Absolutely.
And just to have those options when, the usual publishing or other means aren't available is crucial.
Yeah. And there's nothing better than live.
Right. I know. Yes.
Live theater.
Yes.
How could you?
Yes, it is.
Substitute anything. Unless you get a book published. That's a good one.
Oh, yes. Yes. That's a good day for sure. For sure.
So, Weave and Spin performance series.
Yes.
What is that? Who started it? And tell us.
So I started it. The idea came to me towards the end of 2022. Hillsborough did not have any kind of literary reading series, and I saw a gap and I wanted to fill it. So I approached the Orange County Arts Commission. They're headquartered at the Eno Arts Mill on the border of downtown Hillsborough. And it's a beautiful building. They've got a gorgeous gallery, and Katie Murray, who runs the commission, was very excited and very supportive and said, sure, yeah, let's do it. So as part of the development, I decided that I wanted to focus on writers from, as you said, in the intro, traditionally underrepresented backgrounds. Because really in the area at the literary readings, I didn't see a lot of those people represented. So I wanted to create space for that. And I think it's been really successful. I think it's been a wonderful experience. And the thing that maybe I didn't expect is the way it's created community. So a lot of the same people come every single month. They read at the open mic after the performance, and a lot of friendships and even professional, connections have been made through it. It is.
No, when you say performance series, who's performing what?
So we typically feature poets. We have occasionally, actually, we've had one musician so far. And I hope that we might feature some fiction writers or creative nonfic next year, but we focus on poets. So poets have 30 to 45-minute slot to perform, which is a large amount of space and allows for a really beautiful breadth of work.
So we don't have that much time left.
Yes.
Either. So I would like to hear a few of your poems.
Sure.
And then whatever particular love poem you prepared.
Yes, absolutely. All right. I'm going to read, this is apropos our recent cicada blossoming. I wrote this poem called, "Can You Let the Cicada Be Beautiful?" When one newly broken from its honeyed shell tests flight's imperative, whirs, strikes your skin, will you turn to see who's there? Don't look up. Don't think you deserve only what's lofted. This Holy Spirit lies on asphalt on its back. Reconsider where it comes from, this fear of what can't harm us. Why do we hate it? Turn it over if you are brave enough to touch it. Braver still if you will lift it. Make your fingers delicate as chopsticks on a robin's egg. Don't pitch it in the grass. Let it cling to your wrist, its legs' gentle sharpness. You are just another kind of tree, flesh-barked. It crawls your arm, and that's when you see its eyes of red, such a red we could never manifest, not the richest lips. And its wings when they unstick, intricate as any dragonfly, yet you'll never find them memorialized in silver, glass, or amethyst. Are you brave enough now to allow it to approach your head? You have no xylem, no sap for it to taste, nothing to dread. But would you kiss it? Could you name it the most modest of angels, if much disgraced? An angel must have wings, but surely it can wear any face.
Well, you certainly do represent the underrepresented.
Yes.
In all areas.
Yes, that's right. I know. I like finding beauty in unexpected and maybe disregarded places, we'll say.
Okay, two more.
Perfect. This is called I No Longer Want to Be Heartsick. So I will unsick my heart. Call off the dogs, the troops, the bulldozer that wants to mow down peaceful protest. I will unravel the virus called anguish, fray the ribbon of its RNA. I will steep its bag with nettle and echinacea, wrap its tag around my finger, read the self-help saying, uncynical. My heart will lose the 2-alarm fire, sell the ladders and hatchets. It will send every employee home with pay while the company restructures, or just because it's an awfully sunny day. My heart will stop trying to pretend that it's not a heart, that instead it's a landfill, an uninhabitable planet, an alligator with 80 teeth. It will take off the cheap Halloween costume and visit sauna, bathhouse, nude beach. It will accept that it's Cool Whip, marshmallow, soft serve on a summer afternoon. It will melt uncensored, run its every red. Carnelian and carmine, amaranth and cadmium. It will preside over every kind of blood, moon and menses an open wound. When I unsick my heart, so will you. It will be such a heart that at first you won't recognize it. Even you can forget. You may mistake it for a playing card, an insincere Valentine, the latest dating app. If it makes it easier to see, think of it as the sweetest autopsy you'll ever perform. If that's too gory, just think of it as an apple, red delicious and honey crisp, gala for the celebration that follows, cameo for the part you're going to play in it.
Well, another beautiful.
Thank you.
So that could have been your love poem.
I know. It's a love poem to everyone.
It is. Well, I think we're just about out of time.
Well, thank you.
So I want to thank you very much for your varied selection and particularly your subject matter and for being my guest tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been delightful.
Yes. Well, you've been listening to Poets on Poetry. I'm Sonia Usatch-Kuhn, Peter Rashawn, producer.